Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm gonna give it about 30 seconds for the room to get filled. We've got 68 folks joining, and the number is increasing. Go ahead and say hello in the chat just to make sure the chat's working, and then we'll get this kicked off in just a few seconds. All right, perfect. Rachel, Carol, thanks for being here. Hi, Deb, Casey, Pam, Katrina, Rachel. I'm not gonna be able to say all your names, but the chat is working. So let's get this kicked off. So welcome everyone to our series webinars called Reframe Webinars. It's themed around pricing with confidence, which leads up to our event that is going to be in November. And today's theme is going to be pricing and trade-off theory. It's the idea that pricing can fix everything. And Hector has put a lot of deep thought behind this idea, and we're going to get real philosophical and really go deep in some concepts on how we can take these ideas from pricing and really try to fix our entire business model and our conversations and just how we look at the world from that lens. So moving on to the next slide. If we go to the table of contents, this is what we'll be covering. So we'll talk a little bit about what this series is if you're joining for the first time. We're going to give you some event updates. We know that we are close to 30 days, a little bit over more than 30 days for our event in Miami. We'll talk more about that. And today's conversation is called Pricing and Trade-off Theory. So about the webinar series, it's a 1 hour CPE webinar. This is one of the 10 sessions that we have. I believe our last one is next month. It's every last Friday of the month. If you are part of this, that means you're registered for every single one of them. And the next day, we end up posting it on Hector's YouTube channel. So all the resources that will be shared today, Hector is sharing in the chat, access to the slides now, and then he's also will be putting the recording playback on the YouTube channel. We can go over that. CPE credit, essentially, it is a 1 hour CPE. You must attend at least 50 minutes and answering some of all the polling questions. And after that, Hector and his team, who are certified to provide CPEs, will go ahead and send them to you within several business
I'm just
days.
going to add something.
Now,
We had a miscommunication internally about the process of CPEs, and we're behind on the last four, I think. So next week, I'm actually going to have my team member send them all. So if by October you don't get any CPEs you were expecting, you go ahead and email me. So like next week for sure, we're going to take care of this.
thank you, Hector. Let's talk a little bit about some updates with Reframe. So we've added some stuff to the agenda for those of you who are coming to Reframe and happen to come in on Sunday or before
I'm
Sunday.
gonna just do a quick polling question for that particularly, just to see who in the live audience it's coming, to see for how many that's highly relevant. For many people, it might not be relevant, and for some people, it might be, wow, this is what makes me want to go to Reframe. Possibly, who knows? So
As
we got
everybody's answering the polling questions,
Yep.
we'll just share that Right Tool, being our headline sponsor, is now hosting a morning event on the day of the pre-conference on Sunday, which will be in the same floor, seventh floor in the Sevilla room from 8 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. And that will be limited to 100 people, which is what we estimate will probably be in the property anyway during that time. So if you are interested, an email will be sent to you for you to provide RSVP. And Hector Right Tool is also providing complimentary lunch, right?
Yeah. So okay. So first of all, I'm gonna apologize for people that already bought plane tickets and already planned their hotel and all that stuff. We actually didn't have the space. We didn't have the space. The hotel gave us the good news literally yesterday. We walked the hotel. We did the entire prep of the conference, which we're super excited about. And they told us, by the way, good news, the big room has been made available. So initially, it was only a room of like 30 people, so we had to keep it very tight. So now we have the big room available, a big room available. We'll get into the details for the Right Tool workshop. So now we can spend 3 to 4 hours just going really deep into Right Tool, showing you some of the new things that we're coming with, what we're thinking about, getting some suggestions from you, some brainstorming about how we can make Right Tool better. It's going to be a really cool workshop. We did a 3-day retreat a couple of months ago, and it was amazing. So we're going to try to do like a mini version of that in just 3 hours and take care of lunch for you. So that's an expansion of the event. It's not an extra fee. It's included with the ticket. Right now, I think we looked at the hotel and there's about 70 people that are staying Saturday night. So I assume that if you are staying at the hotel Saturday night, you will wake up and you're gonna want to, come to the Right Tool retreat. It's at 8 a.m. But for those that haven't booked flights yet, you can contact the hotel and have them, extend if you weren't set up to stay Saturday night to come in Sunday. That could be an encouragement to come in, right? No additional cost to you, all plus, 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 plus. You're gonna have a lot more fun, get a lot more conference, and learn the software even deeper. Okay, and it's free and it's provided by the ideal was Right Tool. We'll do this for you. Just do lunch because lunch wasn't included on Sunday. So that's something, a piece of encouragement to come by a day earlier if you were thinking about coming Sunday morning.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about the event. As you know, for those who are coming, you should know what it is by now, but for those who are tuning in, it's the theme is pricing with confidence. The event's called Reframe 2025. Our main keynote speakers are Ron Baker, Trisha Browers, Blair Enns, and Hector Garcia, who's here with us today. And we're really talking about four main themes: transformations, pricing the unknown, packaging, and maximizing the value conversation. It's going to be more than that, but in essence, those are the four themes that we'll talk about. It's in the Lowe's Hotel in Miami, Florida, Coral Gables, which is a specific area that is probably our favorite space. We actually hosted this in 2023, and we had phenomenal feedback audit, beautiful walking space. Spanish architecture themed. It's all the streets are named after cities in Spain. And it's capped at 150 people. We have 147 ready to go. We have 3 cancellations, which opens up 3 spots for anyone who's like still on the fence and are like, you know what, count me in. I'm ready to go. It starts at Sunday, November 2nd, and it ends on November 4th. We do have an add-on for those who have already purchased the add-on that takes place on November 5th, and Chris Do will be there the entire time with us. And he's doing, we'll talk a little about the agenda on the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about that. So as Hector mentioned on the next slide, the pre-conference on November 2nd, the Right Tool workshops in the morning. We will still have the AI and tech updates in the afternoon. And we are hosting a experienced partner dinner. Each experienced partner that is a sponsor, the table sponsor, will actually host an intimate 12 to 15 person dinner. And you will be sent more details on that. So make sure that you clear out your evening for November 2nd because one of our experienced partners will be hosting a wonderful dinner. It's an opportunity for you to network and for you to build closer relationships with the partners that are joining us, the sponsors that are joining us for the event. Many of you who have come before, you're very familiar with them already, and we've got a few new ones that are joining us. Day one, we kick off the entire day with the first workshop in the morning. We have a workshop in the afternoon. We have a panel as well we're super excited about. We have Reframe Society members who have experienced a lot of transformation with pricing that will talk about that. And of course, we're hosting the Reframe party in the evening, which will be fantastic with live music and hors d'oeuvres. And everyone has an opportunity to just celebrate the year, celebrate each other, celebrate the event. On day two, we've got the morning workshop will be value focused. We have another panel that we'll have. And then in the afternoon, we have the packaging workshop, which will be led by Hector. And in the evening, for those who are staying the evening of the 4th, Chris Do will host another event, which will be a whiteboard session, just really picking on Chris's mind and his brilliant view of branding and how it applies to the accounting community. And then, of course, we have the add-on workshop for those who registered for the day 3 event, which is separate from the conference, and that goes from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., hosted and facilitated by Chris Do. So,
I want to add a couple of things. We have some questions here live. So for the Right Tool workshop, you don't need to sign up. Like if you're there, you're in. However, we're going to send you an email. We're going to send you an email to get a general idea just so we can order the food, right? Because it's going to be buffet, right? But I need to know if it's 80 people or 100 people. The room fits like 150, but like we're thinking that's going to be about 100. So you don't have to be signed up. It's now part of Reframe. There's no special thing. I just need to have enough food for lunch. That's it. So we're going to send you an email. If you already are an attendee, we're going to send you an email about that. We're going to send you an email to also double check if you are going to have dinner with the vendors on Sunday. So dinner is included on Sunday night, but we're doing it creatively. So instead of having everybody eat together, we're going to go to nearby restaurants. That way you get a chance to kind of explore Coral Gables a little bit. That area is super cool. And then it's more intimate. It'll be 10 to 15 people. And then, each of the vendors have an opportunity to learn from you. And that's really the idea. And then the expansion for Tuesday night, I know a lot of people are checking out Tuesday and they're probably flying home on Tuesday, and that's fine. No big deal. But for those that are staying through Wednesday, whether they're coming to Chris Doe's workshop or not, he's doing a whiteboard session. It's part of Reframe. It's not extra. And we're going to include alcohol, right? Because I know between 8 and 10, when people are in conferences, they want to have that option. They want to end up in a bar. So this way, what we're doing is, instead of having you go to the bar, we're going to stay here and we're going to do some more talking. And then Chris is going to talk about the repositioning problem that we have. It's like, how do we shift the perspective from what people think accountants are to what we want people what we want people to think what accountants are. And then the workshop itself, the one that's the add-on, that's to work on your personal branding. Like, all of us have to rebrand ourselves personally before we rebrand the profession. And that's what day 3 is all about. Okay. So we want to thank all the sponsors. We have a new sponsor that we didn't mention last week, as it just came in. They actually took on the spot that Right Tool left behind when they got upgraded to Headline, which is Worthy. Okay, so all the links to all the sponsors are here. There's gonna be representatives. They're gonna have tables, all that stuff. Okay, Carlos, can I get right started? Are there any questions in the live chat? Okay, cool. All right. So first, I'm going to start by asking you a question, which is, there are 4 life principles that I absolutely love. Okay. One is don't assume. The other one is don't take it personally. The third one is be impeccable with your word. And the fourth one is always be your best. This comes from my favorite book. I want to know how much of you knew what this book is. So just put in the live chat there if you know what book this comes from. Okay. And only put it after, if you actually knew, not necessarily you read somebody else answer it. So how many people have read this book? This would be a really, really interesting experiment. It's a really tiny book. It's called The 4 Agreements. It expands each of these. It's an incredible guiding principle and it's a very stoic, by the way. It's a very stoic, and I talked about stoicism and my love for it and all that stuff. But it's very simple. And if you haven't read it, pick it up. It's actually a great little book. And it's also a great little life philosophy that you can apply to all of life problems. And I'm going to circle back to this. Okay. This is my personal favorite book. I teach it to my kids, but I'm going to circle back to this. So you're going to see that the topic I'm going to talk about, how it comes down to. Now, pricing fixes everything. That is something that I for a very long time, I wanted to kind of convince the world that pricing, like learning how to pricing better, pricing theory, value pricing can fix everything, and anything. But I usually thought about it in the context of a business, right? So if the customer is being a pain in the butt, raise the price, right? And if they pay enough, they're no longer a pain in the butt. They're just a very demanding customer that pays really well. Or if you want to get rid of a customer, raise the price. You don't even have to get rid of them. They'll fire themselves, so to speak. So that's kind of where the principle came through. But for me to make a statement like pricing can fix everything, and it's something I've been thinking about really, really deeply. I wanted to know if I can apply this to a really big problem, like a customer being a pain in the butt. That's not a big problem. And I wanted to ask you if you agree, like this is my opinion, the biggest problem that we have in this country is political division and broken discourse. I think that's the biggest number one problem. I mean, you don't have to agree with me on this, but I want to ask you in the poll, do you agree this is the biggest problem? And I don't want to not going to get too political, although we are going to discuss politics in this. And the reason why I'm doing it is because it's the most polarizing, the hardest thing to talk about. And I'm going to show you how I can talk about it in a political fashion, and I can talk about it without being divisive. I can talk about it in a way to alert us on how we behave towards pricing and how our customers react towards pricing, which connects to the exact same way that customers react towards a political division. It's actually the same psychological phenomenon, in my opinion, without having to pick a side or anything like that. It's just talking about the phenomenon itself. So do you agree this is the biggest problem? And Carlos and I, like our home country, like where we lived when we were kids, um, what made our home country political situation break was that the politicians were very successful at dividing the country. And that was the first thing. Like once you divide the country, then it's easy to take more power. And I think you're seeing it today. You know, the more divided the country is, the more the politicians in power feel empowered, so to speak, to gain more power. I don't know if am I making sense, Carlos? Is okay? All right. So I think again, so that's why I picked a very difficult and challenging topic to test the theory that can pricing or price theory or understanding what I'm calling pricing and trade-off theory be used to fix big problems. And if you can fix big problems like the political and division discourse, it's going to be super easy to fix some of the smaller business problems, so to speak. Okay. All right. Go ahead and end the polling question. I'll share it with you. It looks like 51% of you agree that it is the biggest problem that we have, and another 45% of you definitely a top three. So at least for the most part, we're in the same page that I picked the most difficult problem to try to fix. And here we go. In this Reframe webinar, we're going to fix this problem. The first way to fix the problem is that all of us need to understand the difference between attacking and protecting. Sometimes protecting can feel to the other person that is attacking, okay? Because if you look at sports analogies where they go offense is the best defense, right? Some people say that. But I think in this particular situation, in something sensitive like political discourse, and then translate it into a customer rejecting you because of your price and you feeling attacked because of it, I think it's really important for all of us as a society, each individual of us, to be okay and to be comfortable with attacking the idea, not the person. Attack the idea, not the person. Okay, it's okay to protect, but if you're going to attack the idea, not the person. Okay, and I think even though we're attacking, it's actually a challenge too, right? Because again, even if you that choice of words is it's a problem. You know, we could reframe that to challenge the idea. But I'm trying to use attack and protect as the two words that are sort of at odds of each other as a dichotomy. But I would definitely reframe that as challenge the idea more than attacking the idea. But I guess the concept is, if you're going to attack something, if attack is there, should be the idea only, not the person. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, when someone wants to protect their resource, okay, we're gonna deep dive into what does that mean? What do you mean the resource? Okay, when someone wants to protect the resource or is overzealous about protecting the resource, that's not the same thing as attacking the person. So I invite you to perceive attacks and reframe them as that's really the other person being overprotective about their resource or being overprotecting their resource. Now, the other challenge that political division has is that it extends over to an us versus them mentality. I've seen this in conferences, especially accounting conferences, where accountants are us and annoying clients are them. I don't think that's positive behavior, right? Like people just say, I just fire them. Like, somebody will say, hey, I have this issue. And immediately the reaction is just fire them, right? Or I would just fire them. And it's like, okay, that's an us versus them mentality. That lacks, like Carlos would be saying, hey, that lacks curiosity, Carlos's favorite word, right? It's like, hey, before we think that is an us versus them, in my opinion, us versus them is a human construct. Like it's not a us versus them is actually not a law of physics, right? It's not a law of humanity. It's not a biological concept. It's a human construct because we get to choose who is us and we get to choose who is them. And there's the same people can be us versus them depending on the situation, right? Like if we're talking about accountants versus our clients, it's us versus them. But even within accountants, there could be a political division, and then there would be an us versus them. And then within accountants, there's bookkeepers and CPAs that also play into this horrible game of us versus them. You understand what I'm saying? So like the us versus them is the problem, okay? And I think that that can be swayed simply by identifying which internal narrative is ruling our thought process and is ruling our behavior in the moment. So it's not a truth per se. And again, you can believe it to be true, but it's more of an internal narrative than an absolute truth. I guess that's the concept I'm trying to bring in. So what are those resources? Okay. Now, these resources come, for the most part, about our subconscious belief that resources are scarce. Okay. So we view them as limited. And we're all going to try to protect them, right? The less that we have, the more we want to protect. So the tangible ones is 12 resources. The tangible ones are your money, your property, your health. We can connect that to family, your autonomy, your time, and your energy. Could also be called attention. These are 6 out of the 12. These are the tangible side. Then we have our intangible resources, which is our peace of mind. Like this is more of our psyche, right? Like just mental health, we can call it that. Our relationships, we value that as a resource. And the older we get, sometimes those relationships are breaking and breaking, especially with the political challenge that we have now. We want to protect that. Our reputation, that's, you know, our brand, you can call it even. Our heritage, like this in the political discourse, there's a lot of attacking heritages, right? Which like nothing to do with me, the person, you know, what I have to do with my ancestors, right? Then the legacy. So this is like, that's the heritage is the post, heritage is the pre-life, and then legacy is the post-life. And then lastly, our intellectual capital or our knowledge, so to speak. So these are the 12 resources that the average human views as limited, as scarce, and we're all trying to protect them. And protecting them is not the same as attacking you. So I want to start with the catch-all rejection that makes every accounting professional cringe, which is, that's too expensive. Now, the point I want to make is that when a customer says that's too expensive, sometimes it means, you know, that dollar value is too high, right? Like it means literally what they're saying. But I think most of the time, it doesn't really mean that's too much money or that's not valuable enough. What it really means is I am not ready to sacrifice one of my resources yet. The idea that you're proposing is not compelling enough for me to sacrifice one of my resources yet. That's the trade-off, okay? They're not rejecting two, they're not rejecting you, they're making a trade-off calculation, okay? And we didn't have the trade-off conversation with them, which Carlos will talk about towards the end. So let's break them down. Let's start with money. Oh, Carlos, maybe at this point, is there anything you want to add? So, you know, anything that I missed?
No, I think you're spot on. I don't have anything to add.
Okay. So the other thing, before we get that, the other thing is, and this is a little bit of a challenge, similar to politics, we tie the acceptance of our value to our personality, or we tie some political belief or religious belief to our personality. And the problem with that is that when somebody attacks the idea, okay, and they're doing it correctly, they understood the assignment, they're attacking the idea, not the person. By extension, if we made that our personality, then we will take it personal. So the most important lesson here is to detach your personality with your idea, or your personality with your belief, or your personality with your value. That way we don't run into the trap, or we don't fall into the trap of allowing or getting offended by somebody doing it the right way, attacking the idea, not the person. Okay, so that's the premise. So I start with money. Money, everybody knows that, right? It's our fundamental sense of economic survival. It's our cash flow, our savings. It's the buffer against uncertainty, right? Uncertainty is a huge emotional driver. It activates deep survival instincts, you know, when threatened. Very important. So let's talk about a typical political issue that divides us. So debates over taxes, right? Should they increase taxes, decrease taxes? Should they increase benefits, decrease benefits? And both sides are trying to protect their financial security, right? So if I am a high earner, I want to keep more of my money, right? And if I'm a low earner, maybe I feel that it's unfair that I earn so little, right? And the internal narrative that is enabling this us versus them political discourse is they are taking from me to give to others. Okay. So that's usually the pivotal point, the wedge issue when it comes to any money or tax discussion, when it comes to specifically the money topic. So let's do a client scenario. So now we're going to start connecting these to our day-to-day accounting practices, right? So thank you for giving me 25 minutes to build the premise. Now let's connect this to accounting. So let's say, for example, you are offering, an upgrade from basic bookkeeping to some sort of full accounting financials to go from 400 to 1200. So then the client tells you that's too expensive. Okay. Or maybe they're not saying that's too expensive, or they say that's too expensive, but what they really meant to say is that's 3 times what I'm already paying. I can't justify $800 more per month. That's $10,000 a year, right? They start creating these narratives of what the money means or what it means to them. And that's me sacrificing some piece of equipment or whatever. So once again, the reframe to this is they're not attacking you. They're protecting their cash flow. They're not attacking you. They're protecting their cash flow. Most importantly, customers are asking themselves at that moment really, really quick. And when they're saying that's too expensive, really, the reason why they're saying that's too expensive is because they don't have a clear answer to, will I have enough money to pay payroll, rent, my personal expenses, unexpected expenses, etc. So if now you know that that's too expensive, might really mean, will I even have enough money to pay payroll, rent, unexpected expenses? We should probably address that problem and not that's too expensive problem, or not feel attacked that they're undervaluing, or that potentially undervaluing you. Let's talk about property. So that's our tangible foundation. These are our physical assets, stuff we can touch, control, call our own, real estate, equipment, inventory, right? That they provide practical utility, psychological security, representing stability, fruits of our labors, etc. What's a key political issue with property? Right. So there's conflicts over development, rent control, land use or regulation, right? Property rights, right? What's the internal narrative that we feel that makes this a wedge issue? They're trying to change my neighborhood or threaten my investment. Now, I don't have any slides here, but guns are similar, right? A lot of people feel that gun control, again, the internal narrative is they're trying to take my gun, right? That's your property, right? Because that's your property. You want to protect it. So it's not always, I think with guns particularly, it's not always that people want to protect the concept of being able to have guns. A lot of people just want to protect their physical property. Like, it just feels like you're going to take my thing. Why are you taking my thing? This is the one thing that makes me feel secure, right? So that's the political side. Now let's talk about the client scenario. So actually, I'm gonna move to health and family for the sake of time. I think we understood that one because property and money are very similar or connected. Okay, let's talk about health and family. So our most precious, irreplaceable resource, people we love, our physical capacity, health insurance, Medicare, all that stuff, and it does trigger primal protective instincts. So here's a typical political wedge issue, right? Debates over the healthcare system. Should we have universal healthcare? What about school choice, right? They create a lot of emotional division because it directly impacts on families. What is the narrative that's causing this us versus them mentality? Is they are putting my children's future at stake, or they are indoctrinating my children, or they are increasing my healthcare costs, that sort of thing. So let's do a client scenario. So for example, you're going to offer monthly fees from, an increase from 500 to 1,000 to add payroll. Okay, it's just an example, and employee benefits. So the client might say something like, that's too expensive, or what they really might be saying is, that's an extra $500 a month. That's the cost of my daughter's violin lessons and my wife's physical therapy. If I pay this additional payroll compliance thing that you're offering me, I am going to take away from my family, from my family's well-being. So the reframe is, again, they're not rejecting your services. They're just prioritizing your family's well-beings. The anxiety is they're asking themselves, how can I justify taking resources away from my family, and instead invest it into this accounting thing that the accountant is offering. Next one is autonomy. So fundamental self-determination. Can I move anywhere? Can I have freedom? Can I make my own decisions? Resistance to mandates, right? This happened a lot, during COVID with the masks and stuff, right? Are you imposing things on me, right? They're tied to my identity and my dignity. So, one of the political wedge issue that again causes the us versus them mentality is conflicts over vaccine requirements, business regulations to shut down the businesses, right? It pits collective against individual choice. The internal narrative is they are controlling my decisions. So let's talk about a client scenario. So monthly financial reviews will require documentation and approval processes. That's going to cost a lot more than the old service, right? And it's going to go from 500 to 2,500 or whatever it is. And the client response could be, I don't want somebody looking over my shoulder. I've been running my business for 15 years. I know what I'm doing. Once again, they're not questioning your competence. They're not rejecting too. They are protecting their independence. Okay. The questions they're asking themselves that maybe they don't have an answer to is, why should I justify every financial decision to someone else, to some third party? Time, the big one, right? Our most finite, irreplaceable resource. Some people say it's not even a resource, it's a constraint because we don't control it, we can't store it. It's unlike money or property. You cannot recover time, you can't store it. Hours of the day, quality time, freedom from stress, controlling your schedule, all that stuff ties to time. So, with government wedge issues, right? We have, long wait times, complexity of forms, inefficient processes because, they waste the citizens' time. What is the notion, right? The us versus them is they, quote unquote, big government, they're just wasting my time. And by the way, I agree with that. The government makes us waste a lot of time, particularly IRS holding times, et cetera, et cetera. It does create that us versus them mentality. So let's talk about a client scenario, right? Where, you have to go back and clean up the work. And, going back and cleaning up the work, means that we have to charge, a fixed fee of, I don't know, $12,000, whatever it is. So we can go back and clean that up and create a starting point. And then the client response, again, maybe is, you're too expensive, or maybe what they're really thinking or not saying or not articulating is, it's a lot of money for like old information. I'd rather focus my time and resources on moving forward, not backwards. But you believe that backwards information needs to be done prior to the future one, right? So again, are they avoiding responsibility? Are they attacking your idea? Or they're just protecting their future time, right? So the question they're asking themselves that they might not have an answer to is, why spend time fixing yesterday where I could be building tomorrow? And it's a great question to ask. Again, most of us is the accountants that are worried about the past information that our clients are, even when we know it needs to be done. What about energy and attention? So our mental and emotional bandwidth, right? Our capacity to focus, to process information, to make decisions, right? Mental fatigue, cognitive overload. This information is, this world is very information saturated. What's a typical political wedge issue? Constant political news and opinions, right? By the news, which is not really news, it's just opinions. Social media debates, they exhaust our mental bandwidth. So our internal narrative is, they are overwhelming me with complexity. Hopefully at this point, you kind of see the pattern here. You're using this exact same pattern to attack every one of these resources. So now the examples will start making sense, and you can make your own examples. Let's say, for example, you offer monthly management reporting with KPI dashboards, trend analysis, strategic recommendations. That we're bombarding them with all these things they need to look at, dashboards and data and measurements and all these things. So your client response could be, that's too expensive, or it could be maybe what they're thinking is, I'm already overwhelmed with the information. I don't have time to analyze one more report. Again, they're not rejecting the new insights you're giving them. They're protecting their mental bandwidth. Okay, so this reframing is very important because it allows you not to take things personal. The questions they're asking themselves, in which they're not sure if they have the answer to, is how can I process even more data, more information, if I am already overwhelmed? Yeah, I came to the accountant to get less overwhelmed, not more overwhelmed. What about peace of mind, right? So these are psychological equilibrium, right? Feeling that things are under control, that they're predictable, that they're safe, freedom from anxiety, confidence in my decisions, trusting that major problems are not lurking behind the scenes. Okay. What's a typical political wedge issue? Political complaints that exploit threats to peace of mind. They talk about crime and economic collapse and terrorism and blue cities versus red cities and all that stuff, right? So what's the internal narrative here is they're making me worry about more new problems, right? It's like they're creating problems that in my head didn't exist, but the news or political campaigns just kind of drills that into our head, that goes into our peace of mind. So let's do a client example in which they're trying to protect their peace of mind. So for example, we want to offer some sort of proactive IRS audit protection and correspondence support that's $450 a year. Again, I'm just throwing the numbers out there. And your client responds, again, it could be that's too expensive, but what they really mean to say is, I'd never be audited by the IRS. My taxes are straightforward. I don't want to pay for something that creates anxiety about problems that I don't even have yet. Are they being naive, or are they just protecting their sense of security? Again, very important. So what is the question they're asking themselves, in which they're not sure if they have the answer to, which is, if I pay for this audit protection, does that mean that I should start being worried? So imagine a world where you were never offered audit protection because that's not something you need to protect yourself from. And all of a sudden, you just created a new thing I need to protect myself from. Okay, that's going to bring a lot of anxiety. What about relationships, right? Our connections to family, friends, colleagues, customers, that sort of thing. Let's talk about political wedge issues. So political divisions, typically try to pin you with the proverbial us versus them, right? Split family bonds. And the notion here is, the internal narrative is, I think they're forcing me to choose a side. That shouldn't be like that. So let's talk about typical client examples. So for example, I want to add stricter financial controls to require the spouse of the business owner to have to go through an approval process before they spend something over 500 or 1,000 or whatever. So you're suggesting this, and it's not even an extra service. This is just you suggesting a behavior change. So the client response might be, again, some version of that's too expensive, which is, I can't ask my wife or my husband, doesn't matter, to get permission for business expenses. She's my partner, not my employee. This is going to create tension or break my marriage or whatever. So are they avoiding accountability, or are they just protecting their life partnership? Once again, the reframe is really important. You can see the world much differently. And the question they're asking themselves, in which they're not sure if they have the answer for, is, how can I limit my spouse's spending patterns without suggesting that I don't trust them, right? See, as an accountant, we're trying to protect people's assets. We're telling them, hey, sounds like your spouse is, spending more than they're supposed to, right? And we want to kind of put a control mechanism on that. And then that idea could be immediately, the reaction to that idea could feel like it's an attack. But again, they're just protecting that resource. What about your reputation or brand? How other people perceive us, our confidence, our integrity, our reliability, our professional standing, our trust, community respect, all that stuff. So what's a typical political wedge issue is where the politicians focus on the personal characteristics of the person rather than the policy. Okay, and then they try to make it that the personal, the attack the character, the personality. And unfortunately, the personality and the policies should be two different things. So the internal narrative is, they're attracting my credibility, right? Like, if I believe on this person's policies because they're attacking their character, or attacking their personality or whatever, they're attacking me because that's my credibility too. Then we have a typical customer scenario. And I'll end at this. So all the slides are there. I'll end at this so we can move over to the practical applications of this. But let's say, for example, you're offering an audit. You're offering an annual audited financial statements, right? So they can increase their strength with their bank or suppliers or customers or whatever. So your client response might be, again, some version of that's too expensive, which really means my customers and suppliers already trust me. I work with them for decades. I don't need to pay for an audit to prove what they already know. Again, are they being overconfident or not trusting your suggestion for the audit? Or are they just protecting their established reputation? And once again, the question they're asking themselves that they're not sure if, or you haven't provided the answer for is, why pay thousands to prove what my track record already demonstrates? So there's a couple more, right? There's examples for heritage, for legacy, for intellectual capital. I invite you to look at all the examples, and I'll kind of wrap it up with, again, we started with talking about my life philosophies that I believe from the 4 agreements is, if I were to put these things into practical advice, I would say, don't assume that expensive means money or value in the simple sense. It could mean something beyond that, right? As Carlos would say, stay curious and get the real reasons. Second one is, don't take it personally. They're not attacking you. They're protecting their resource, right? Be impeccable with your word and avoid an emotional response you could regret. So avoid the emotional response that you could regret. Okay, so that's that one. And the last one is always be your best, or always be the best version of yourself, which is kind of translated to the follow-up with this, which is, how do we apply this? Which is, show them that you're there to help, and really help them make the trade-off decision. You're not there to sell them, you're there to help them make the trade-off decision. So everything here is connected to the concept of the trade-off talk, right? As when I was a kid, the most uncomfortable conversation I ever had with my parents was the birds and the bees conversation. Now I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old, and it's equally uncomfortable for me to now be the parent that has that conversation. And I think the trade-off talk is the business and accountants version of the birds and the bees conversation. It's very, very difficult to have. It brings up new concepts that you didn't know or weren't prepared to talk about with your client. But I think having the courage to step up and having the trade-off talk is how we apply these things. So Carlos, maybe you can take it away from here.
Yeah, so I mean, all of this is really incredible, just introspective knowledge around the motivation of the human psyche when it comes to, we're talking about resources and money. Money conversations is stem deeply rooted in so many other aspects that we don't even understand, right? We're all raised to look at money differently. If you grew up in a household where money was scarce, and the way that your parents or the authority figures in your upbringing behaved around money, that shapes how you look at money. If you are born in a family that has a lot more access to those resources, then you look at money differently, and so do your clients. And ultimately, I think there was a comment saying earlier from Mark saying that a lot of this is change management, right? These conversations is how to navigate change around where they're allocating their resources. So when you're talking to someone about something and there's going to be a cost, they need to access their resources in order to, solve a problem that you can potentially provide. They know that they have to sacrifice a resource elsewhere, thus entering the human psyche of the fear, the potential scarcity mindset, the fear of the unknown, the what if this, what is the trade-off. And so this is where we go into the trade-off conversation, which the first thing is, when you're hearing the objection, based on the context that you've already kind of understood from the earlier conversation, is try to label what is it that they're really, what is it that the resource that they're trying to protect, right? That they're probably trading off if they were to invest additional money to hire you for a specific service or a specific conversation. And then maybe asking some sort of clarifying question. Then from there is try to reframe the way they're currently looking at it with the perspective they might have around it by stating a fact or a benefit, like what could be some of the potential benefits or the facts. We could also shift to risks. What is the risk of not taking action? What is the risk of not making that investment? What is the risk of shopping around for a cheaper resource? to solve this problem, whether it's a bookkeeping service, a compliance related service, whatever specific product or service delivery they're requesting. And then ultimately you want to just kind of gauge, where they are with it after you're getting that clarity by asking the clarifying question. And while you're stating a fact or a risk or a benefit of action slash inaction, so that they can at least start seeing things from a different perspective, right? Because they're probably seeing things currently from their own worldview. And once you've learned what their worldview is, you present an alternate perspective that might have risks or benefits if those decisions are being made. And then ultimately trying to move towards a mutually agreeable solution. And this is where you're looking at the trade-offs. If we were to do this, then would that make sense for you? Potentially, etc. And so let's break it down step by step. So if we go to step one, label the resource on the next slide, then what we're really doing here is we're trying to understand what is the resource that they're talking about. Hector, if you can move it to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah, so if we're using the same example, that's too expensive, you could respond. One of my favorite ways for you to acknowledge that the person, and you want to confirm what is the thing that they are fearful of, or what is the resource they're trying to protect. So you identify that, and you might say, it sounds like blank is really important to you. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to turn a no into a yes. And the way you get yes is you first agree with their current perspective. So it's actually a very easy way for you to gain kind of alignment on, okay, I'm hearing you and you're telling me this is important to you, and I'm showing curiosity and empathy by helping us, navigate this a little bit further. So you could say it sounds like, protecting your money is important to you. It sounds like making sure that you have, you're using your time effectively is important to you. It sounds like, making sure that this is done correctly to protect your family is important to you. It sounds like, the reputation of your business is a priority for you, et cetera, right? So you kind of call it out like that. You get the client to say yes, right? So they know that you're hearing them, you're listening to them. And after that's been labeled, then the next step would be for you to maybe ask a clarifying question, right? So if we're going to ask maybe a neutral, open-ended question, we would ask something like on the next slide. Can you tell me more about what feels most at risk for you if you move forward at this price? Right. So you're trying to just get clarity, or it's also the idea of what we're talking about unpacking. When you say it's too expensive, what's too expensive for you? Or expensive compared to what? I mean, we've talked about other ways that you could use this, but you're really trying to understand is get more clarity, trying to get more details, get more context, because then it helps you relate to what is it that they're really concerned about. You can also ask, is the bigger concern here immediate cash flow or making sure your resources go towards other priorities? You're just getting clarity so that you can try to understand what are the variables that you can start talking about in the trade-off conversation. Then we go to step three, which is reframing it with a fact or benefit to shift their lens. You can also present risk. I would add risk here as well. So you could, if it's money, you could say, hey, well, this package actually protects your cash flow by catching errors that could cost thousands in penalties. This cleanup means you don't have to spend weekends fixing books. You'll get that time back. We're talking about time. If we're talking about peace of mind, this support ensures that there won't be IRS surprises keeping you up at night. You're making it about them, right? What are the things that they may have not thought about, right? And these are some ways that you can frame it so that they start shifting that perspective as what are the alternative benefits, facts, or risks to consider that they may have not considered already. And then we step into step four, which is the test for reaction. You could just say, well, how does that land with you? Does that shift how you're looking at this trade-off? You're just getting a test, a pulse of where they are with this new information, this new alternative reality that you're building for them, so that you're both kind of aligning towards that mutually agreeable solution, which then you get that reaction, and then you move towards, all right, let's look at this problem together rather than let me be right, you be wrong, because it's not me versus you. It's not my perspective versus your perspective. Is let's look at the problem together. And that's where we go to step five, which is moving towards that mutually agreeable solution. We talk about, hey, let's lay out the trade-offs. If protecting cash flow is more important, We could look at a lighter package that handles the essentials. If peace of mind is higher on the list, the full package ensures no surprises. Which direction feels more aligned to you? It puts them in control, acknowledges the trade-off, and then you keep that value conversation open. What would you add, Hector?
Uh, okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the 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 question I wanted to ask you before I add something is from when you have trade-off conversations, and again, the trade-off conversation is what we're calling our reaction to a rejection, right? Because usually the value conversation is where we start this, discovering what they value, and then when we put the number to what they value, we typically do a pretty good job, and we're pretty fair by saying, hey, all this value we're creating for you, and we're only going to capture a part of that value is going to cost this much. And generally speaking, we are not overpricing or overselling. We're offering what the client needs at the price that it costs for us to do it. Period. Okay. And there is a possibility that someone else could do it for cheaper. All that stuff is true. But generally speaking, even when we walk in with that level of confidence, when we offer and stuff like that, what are like the common areas that hold us back from having the trade-off conversation? In other words, where's the awkwardness of this? Like, because in theory, people are looking at this, in theory, this works. But in reality, like could you tell us, like, where's the awkwardness and how to overcome it? Carlos.
Sorry,
Yeah,
repeat
sorry,
that
can you?
question. You
Yeah,
cut
oh,
off a little bit.
the last question, if I got cut off, was where is the awkwardness? Like, we know this, we have the framework in theory, but where is the awkwardness? Like, where can we expect the awkwardness in the conversation, like the birds and the bees conversation? Where can we expect the awkwardness, so we can overcome it rather than, like, just being discouraged from having the trade-off conversation?
I think it starts with us. I mean, if we're not pre-framing let's say this is happening in a discovery call. If we're not doing a proper pre-frame in the conversation that you're going to talk about price, it's going to feel awkward when you talk about price. If we haven't practiced or felt comfortable with communicating the price, and in the execution of saying what the price is going to be sounds hesitant or sounds unconfident, that's going to transmit a level of energy to the client to also help them interpret, what you're communicating with low level of confidence. It could also be, if you are communicating it and you're sensing a longer pause, you're sensing someone going, like like all those things creates the awkwardness, and it's okay to call it out. It's okay to call it out. It's like, hey, so sounds like, I'm hearing a long pause here. What are your thoughts? Like, just call out what you're seeing and what you're sensing. There's nothing wrong with it. You're not calling anybody out. You're just calling out the energy so that you can step into the conversation.
So you could say something like, I'm sensing, like, obviously you're gonna
Hesitancy.
say, I'm not,
Yeah.
you can't say I'm sensing you don't understand it. Obviously you can't say that, but saying I'm sensing some hesitation, like, I think you can
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah. I'm sensing some hesitation. I'm curious what's on your mind.
Is there a way to reframe this? Um, so, like, instead of going straight to logic, so to speak, like, so people says I'm too expensive, and then we go straight to the logical framework, which is, oh, it sounds to me that, like, health is very important to you. Like, is there a good practice to pre-frame it, to go, hey, listen, I understand that you think it's too expensive. Like, do you have to, I don't know how to say it, like, do you have to transition it, or do you immediately answer that's too expensive with, sounds like, time is very important to you? Like, I'm what I'm avoiding is just being seen as a salesperson, right?
Hmm.
So, like, I'm saying, is there something in between where it doesn't seem like we're going into a framework of a trade-off conversation?
What would you ask if I said it's too expensive, Hector?
um but obviously the context matters. What I would do, and I'll be completely honest, is I would probably resist the urge, or weren't able to resist the urge to immediately feel attacked, right? That they're attacking my value. Okay. I do some pre-work before that, which is I try to avoid talking to people that are gonna say it's too expensive by publishing minimums and telling people my philosophy and that sort of thing. But generally, what I typically ask is compare to what. Like I've always found compare to what to be the most valuable one, because if somebody called me, an accountant, to do accounting work, that means that they are gonna pay something to someone to do quote accounting work. Like the scope could vary, but generally the customer is ready to pay for something, right? So when they say that's too expensive, generally they're not saying, oh, this accounting thing that I asked for is something that I don't need, therefore that's why it's too expensive. Typically it's because they are comparing it or they're anchored to some other number. So that's why I like compare to what. Like it doesn't help the trade-off conversation. It's actually a bit more standoffish, in my opinion, than the trade-off conversation. But that's how I usually react.
Okay. So let's say they use that. They say, you say compare to what? They say, well, I was actually looking at somebody else and they quoted me something much less for this project. And I just wasn't anticipating that this would be the level of investment needed. At that point, I would say, well, it sounds like making the right financial decision for your business's cash flow success is an important, priority for you. So you can just basically grab the context of what they're saying, and then you just showing a little bit of empathy and relatability to that. What they're doing is you're just acknowledging what they're saying to you. That's really all we're trying to do, is help them feel seen and heard. And then you move into, could I share an alternate point of view, so that we can really take a look at the trade-offs of what it would be hiring me versus hiring the other person.
Right.
I
So
don't want
can
to
I
bash on
share?
what they
I
do,
like that.
right?
So can I share an alternate point of view so we can look at the trade-offs between choice A and choice B? I like that.
Or would
Because
it be all right if I share some insights with you? That's just permission to share that alternate point of view.
because the biggest peril I've fallen into for years is compared to what. That's what I say, compared to what, and they go, well, so and so down the street can do this. It immediately makes me switch to us versus them mentality. Oh, they're cheap. They're not certified. They are this, they are that. They're bottom feeders. They probably don't have clients. They probably don't have a YouTube channel. They probably don't have any prestige. They probably have no reputation. They don't care, or they're fly by night company. Like we immediately step into this like us versus them mentality, and we use that as the argument. And I think that's the problem, right? Because if we're using it, how do we prevent our clients from using it too?
I know you don't struggle with this, Hector, which is the art of detachment, where if they say, I think I'm just going to go with them, and you can easily say, okay, great, good luck, right? Not necessarily in an arrogant way, but just more. But I know that you would probably put an extra filter there to say, if you do decide to go with them, can I offer just a couple of extra questions that maybe you want to ask to make sure you're making the best decision? And what you're doing, you're getting in their ear to create a little bit of need awareness, a little bit of extra, like, I'm still on your side, even if you don't choose me. And I'm still looking out for your well-being, even if you don't choose me. And now you're all of a sudden not resentful. You're not mean. You're being in service to making sure they make the best decision. And that typically creates a little bit more comfort and confidence for the other person to say, a little bit guilty too, right? They're like, I'm going somewhere else, but this person's still on my side, even if I didn't choose them. So you just win them over with generosity and, with the willingness to let them know you're there to serve. You're not there to rip them off or to try to charge them an arm and a leg.
Yeah. That we're gonna answer one question because we want to have a hard stop, and I'll answer it because I know Carlos has another meeting. But Sherry's question is, how would you reframe, so to speak, when your customer decides not to pay your invoice and tell you, I had to make some hard decisions and I'm going with someone cheaper? So Sherry, it's a great question, and there's actually two layers to this. So the first layer to this, Sherry, is don't do work before getting paid up front. I would say that's the number one. I know that you've heard this before. I know it's trite. I know that, Hector, it doesn't matter. It just happened. I get it. Okay, so that's the first one. But let's figure out a way not to do work unless you get paid up front. Okay. Now, let's say, for example, that you're like, Hector, but the way I do it and the way all my customers want is they want to pay half first and then half when I finish, whatever it is, a tax return, cleanup work, whatever it matters. So what I would say is charge enough that even if a handful of customers, 5% or whatever, decide not to pay the second part of the bill, it won't give you anxiety. That's how Carlos says how we can practice detachment. So Sherry, that's the 1.5 layer version of this. The last one, which is to answer your direct question, which is your customer said, I had to make some hard decisions. I'm going with someone cheaper and failing to pay your invoice. Generally, I would protect myself in one way, shape, or form where the work itself is gated before that invoice. So for example, I don't file a tax return until the customer pays the tax return, right? Because it hasn't been filed. So if the customer decides to go somewhere else, at least they won't get the return filed by me. Okay. So typically what I do is I tell my client, hey, I understand. And I'm totally okay with you going with someone cheaper. I want to collaborate and help do the transition so it doesn't cost you double or triple starting over from that person. In order to do that, I do need you to pay me the last invoice. So Sherry, hopefully that's the way I would reframe it. So I would say, I totally welcome the decision that you made. I totally get it that you have to cut and go for someone cheaper. And I'm going to support that and I will help you through the transition. But in order to do that, we just got to take care of this last invoice or pay me part of it. And then, we do a payment plan or whatever, but always tie some sort of deliverable to getting that last invoice done. So that's my answer to that, Sherry. Again, there's no magic answer to questions. I'll run the last polling question. Just this is more, I would like to know whether you feel this stuff is actionable. Like for the most part, like again, it's fun to theorize, but I want to know, is this stuff actionable? So I'll launch the poll. So do you think that you can immediately implement this, right? And that's, just be honest with me. That's useful for me when we create future content. And I'll stay for a few minutes if anybody has any other questions. Sherry says, I made the decision to stop work, monthly accounting, and I start telling them that, okay, yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's great work. We were there. Let's see. Anita says 1,000% I can implement this today. Perfect. And I hope I didn't strike a chord with, it's difficult to talk about politics. It's just, without getting into the politics and my political beliefs, I just think that politics are very broken at the moment and they are the hardest thing to fix. And this theory, right, that we can, that it's just a trade-off of resources. It's not a strong belief of one side or the other. Yeah. Amanda says practicing in breakout groups is very helpful for me when it cannot be in person. Yeah, that's kind of the usefulness of being part of the society, right? That you can do practice with the groups. Okay, cool. So I'll go ahead and end this polling question. I'll share it. So it looks like 69% of you think that there's something to implement. I love it. That's good enough. Okay, that means that it was worth doing. And for the folks that I'll see on Reframe, looking forward to seeing you in November. For the folks that will attend the last webinar of this series next month in October, next month, we'll do a deep dive into the event itself. We'll talk about the topics that we'll talk about. Like the next webinar will be less content and mostly around the event itself. Thank you, everybody. We'll wrap it up and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much.